Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm not a Bitcoiner, but I think what we do is quite attractive to Bitcoiners. We are involved in the citizenship by investment programs around the world, which I'll tell you a little bit more, a little bit of advertisement for our company. We've been in this business for 30 years. We've helped generate over $3 billion of investments in various countries around the world, served thousands of countries. We're in the investor immigration industry, which I'll describe a lot more, and we're one of the leading companies in this industry. This is me. I was born in the States. I'm one of you guys, but after college I moved to Russia, where I started my career and ended up living for 25 years. We have offices pretty much all over the world. I'm personally licensed to practice immigration law in Canada, but we work, again, all over the world in Montenegro, Egypt, the Caribbean. So what is citizenship by investment? Citizenship by investment is what's called a quasi-judicial procedure of exchanging citizenship for an investment. So now what does quasi-judicial mean and what does citizenship mean? Those are two things that aren't always understood. So citizenship is a status that is given to people who are citizens. It can happen by birth, it can happen by heritage, or it can happen by an investment, for example, or it can happen by just moving to a country and spending a lot of time. We're in this space of helping people get the citizenship through investments in a short period of time. Normally, to get citizenship, it takes 4, 5, 6, 7 years of living in a country. What we do is much shorter. It's between 4 to 8 months kind of thing, generally. When I say quasi-judicial, what it means is that it's not that you can just pay a government money and immediately get citizenship. The governments who have these citizenship programs, they don't just take the money. They understand that by providing citizenship, which awards also the ability to get a passport, they understand their responsibilities as part of the international security system. And by giving somebody the ability to travel, they are creating a certain amount of risk for other countries as well. And so they have to minimize that risk as much as they possibly can, or eliminate that risk. Make sure that the people who are carrying their passports are not going to be breaking laws or breaking either immigration laws or other laws or terrorists or anything like that. So there's a application procedure to a government, and the government then has a legal process, goes through a legal process of analyzing this application. Now, the application, and I know that for Bitcoiners this isn't something nice, is very intrusive, to be honest. Very, very intrusive. They want to know everything about you. Again, they're part of the international security system, and they're giving you certain rights to a new kind of identity. And they have to be really, really careful about how they give that award, that status. So there's a very serious and protracted due diligence process, again, that is quite intrusive. They require a lot of documentation about sources of funds, about criminal histories, and where people are keeping their money, and how they're keeping their money, and how they made their money, and all that. It's sort of like what banks generally do, but a lot more serious and, again, more intrusive. In most countries, one needs to apply to the government to go through this process through what's called an authorized agent. The government regulates and licenses certain either people or companies to interact with them, to interact on their behalf, to represent them to the government in this whole process. We are an authorized agent. We interact with numerous governments around the world because we're regulated. And the regulation also is something about consumer protection. It's just like in the U.S. where if you hire a lawyer, that lawyer has to be a lawyer, a member of a bar. And if he's not a member of the bar, then he can't represent you. And so it's the same kind of regulation in most of these countries. So the main countries that offer a pathway to citizenship that is relatively fast or faster than others these are sort of the main countries. There are many others. What's interesting, obviously, that most Americans don't really know about, but one of the most popular investor immigration programs is the U.S., what's called the EB-5 program, where in exchange for an $800,000 investment, one can get a green card, what's called a green card here, and after 5 years get citizenship. It's very popular with a lot of people from mostly it's Asia and the Middle East and some South America. Now, Portugal in Europe is also a very popular program, which requires an investment in an investment fund for a 7-year period. It takes a couple of years to get the residency and 5 years from when you apply to get the citizenship. But the most popular one, mostly based on, in all honesty, price, are the countries in the Caribbean. Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts, Dominica, St. Lucia, Grenada. I'm sure you've heard of these countries. These are now, because of the price and because of how quickly the path is to citizenship, have just traditionally become most popular. So, why citizenship by investment? Citizenship by investment really sort of depends on where you're from. So, and your own personal circumstances and how you want to change those personal circumstances. For people, for example, from China, who are very, very limited in their ability to travel, if you can imagine a Chinese businessman making $1 billion, becoming a billionaire, and he wants to fly his private 767 Boeing to France for some escargot, he needs to first, before he does that, go to the French embassy in Beijing and line up outside in the cold and try to get into the French embassy, and then a young consular official grills him and asks him why he's going to France and what business he has, and he has to ask, and it's not only intrusive, but it takes time, it's kind of insulting, and it's something that Americans who happen to have been born in America instead of being born in China or in many, many other countries don't have to face. If you want to go to France, you just jump on your private 767 Boeing and you fly to France, and you don't have to ask anybody anything. So there are a lot of aspects of control, obviously, of governments that governments have over you in the countries that you were born. And so another reason for citizenship by investment is jurisdictional arbitrage, and that's more important for Americans, where in America we're controlled by one big, huge government, and here people in Bitcoin understand that there's a lot of control that we don't necessarily like. There's control of our finances, controls of our freedoms, and they may become worse or better depending on what happens in the next 6 months or so. And so gaining a second citizenship is a way of diversifying your assets. We all know that once you've made some money, the way to keep that money and make it grow is all about diversification. We have to diversify risk because risk is everything in our life, in our finances, in everything that we do. And so having the risk of being tied to just one country is a really risky thing. So we provide a bit of jurisdictional arbitrage. If you want to move somewhere for lifestyle, you can move somewhere for lifestyle. If you feel that because of the political things that are going on, the risks of civil war in some countries, the risk of political upheaval, not being tied down and having to live in just one country is an important thing. And we're seeing this movement amongst Americans, and especially people in the crypto space. We're seeing more and more interest in gaining the extra little bit of diversification and the extra little bit of freedom that this type of jurisdictional arbitrage gives. To be clear, and this is sort of the last thing I'll be speaking about, unfortunately, none of the countries accept Bitcoin. We'd love them to accept Bitcoin. We'd love them to accept any cryptocurrency. But as I said before, this is a very, very intrusive, short time, but intrusive process. The governments have to understand exactly where they're getting their money from. So what can happen is, yes, there can be agents between the government and the client who turn Bitcoin into fiat and then pay in fiat. But this isn't something that you can do with Bitcoin and pretty much nowhere in the world, and that's an important thing, and it becomes sometimes difficult for people in the crypto industry to exchange their money, their Bitcoins, because they want to hold on to their Bitcoins or whatever the reason is. But it's important to understand that although this may work for people personally, people in the Bitcoin world, that unfortunately the governments just don't accept Bitcoin, not as of yet. So we have a booth here. If anybody would like to come join us, we're here to answer any questions. Love for you to come over. And now I believe it is lunchtime. Enjoy. Thank you.